Okay, welcome everyone to the Livestock Advisor Updates webinar for June. This one is obviously the next steps for moving into consulting, and it builds on the recent webinar which Leanne Sheriff hosted, starting out in consulting. And it was on the back of that we received quite a lot of feedback that advisors out there would just like to hear that next step of critical information to help them make the decision to make a plunge into consulting. So today's webinar will be presented by Andrew Whale and Elise Bowen. So to start today's webinar, we have Andrew Whale from Livestock Logic. Andrew is a vet who predominantly works as a sheep consultant with producers in Victoria, New South Wales and South Australia. Andrew focuses on a number of areas with his clients, utilising his skills in animal health, nutrition, financial benchmarking and animal management to improve whole farm performance and profitability. Andrew is going to start by sharing some information about his pathway into consulting and some of his key learnings and successes. So over to you, Andrew.
Okay, sorry about that, having me. As Joe sort of outlined, I'm a vet. My background, vet science at Wagga, graduated in 2011. Probably always had going through vet school and growing up, sheep production and horses, and I'm sort of really interested in race horses. And they were sort of the two things that I sort of considered going through vet school as what I wanted to focus on. And I only bring that up because I guess what has always been of interest to me is sort of business, and I see the horse racing industry as sort of a business side of vet work, whereas most other vet work is sort of more the caring of small animals. So I think it just probably gives a bit of insight into what I'm interested in. So I worked in mixed practice in North East for about 12 months. And then I was really happy there. It was a dairy clinic, or dairy and mixed clinic, but I did a fair bit of sort of dairy stuff. And then an opportunity came up to buy into a clinic in Hamilton, Victoria, with David Rendell. He had his sort of own sheep vet business, more sheep and beef. And I probably David sort of talked about it being a sheep consultancy business, but when I came on board, it was very much David has great skills in being able to offer consultancy work, but he was busy doing the day-to-day stuff. He was doing a lot of pre-testing, a lot of calvings, also doing a lot of drench management advice. But really his 9 to 5 was clinical vet work, and then he'd work all hours of the night doing sort of consultancy stuff. So yeah, I joined a business with him, and we ended up sort of bringing a few clinics together, and I probably had a similar start to my career where I was doing a lot of clinical vet work, but really was wanting to get into the consultancy space, and I was sort of trying to juggle that while doing clinical vet work. And I guess, yeah, why did I want to get into consultancy work? I think this sums it up pretty well, but most vet work is sort of waiting for a problem to arise and then, minimise the damage. I consider it sort of fire brigade work that you're there to solve a lot of problems. I guess pre-testing doesn't really fit into that category, but most of the other stuff is trying to fix up a problem. So examples of that: calving issues, sheep dying with worms, poor conception rates. They're all things that you want to be discussing 6 months prior to the issue, not at the time, and trying to have a conversation with the producer about how they could have avoided sheep dying with worms at the time when they're dying with worms is no one really wants to be there having that conversation. So I guess I felt like there's got to be a way we can have better impact with producers and have conversations that are more along the lines of prevention rather than treatments and cures, which I think, I would expect that most people in this room understand where I'm coming from on that front. So yeah, how I got into it. So when I finished uni, lifetime U management course was sort of probably in its infancy. It had been running for probably 6 or 8 years, maybe longer, but like most courses, it takes 4 or 5 years to get any sort of traction. Going through uni at Wagga, I had quite a lot of mates in that area. and they had sort of gone back onto the farm, and Lifetime U hadn't really made it outside of Victoria at that time. So I guess like a lot of things, timing is everything in life. But it sort of coincided with people wanting to do this course. I was a vet, so I had some sort of animal health skills, and I was pretty passionate about sheep. So I started it was just 2 groups. It was actually while I was working in the clinic in Salangata, and started with these sort of 12 guys in a Lifetime U course. And then when I moved to Hamilton, I was sort of, as I said before, working as a clinical vet around Hamilton, and then I was sort of doing these weeks every sort of 6 to 8 weeks. I'd go up to New South Wales and offer my consultancy services. But for a number of reasons, I was trying to not do the consultancy work closer to Victoria. But as time went on, and I really wanted that to be my sort of wholly and soul sort of part of what I do, I started sort of offering a service in Victoria. And something I wanted to just mention was that so I did these Lifetime U courses, and I think in the course you do with producers, they should be an opportunity for you to sort of show your skills and get to know these guys. And I think Lifetime U, and there's other courses out there, but when you get sort of 6, 8 repeat sessions with people, I feel like they really you should be able to convert some of them into clients. And I guess I say that now with a bit of confidence, but what happened when I finished those courses with these guys is we stopped seeing each other, and a couple of them would ring me every now and again for advice, and they'd say, oh, can we keep doing some work? Is there a way you can put us, offer us something that we can keep doing work with you? And I kept saying to them, oh yeah, we can. And but I wasn't actually telling them what they could do. And at some stage, one of them rang me up, and he knew me pretty well. He said, Whaley, there's a couple of us that really want to work with you, but we just need to know what it is, what it costs, and what's involved. And it sort of was the kick in the bum that I needed. And I think that night I sort of put together this proposal, and I sent it out to the 24 people that I put through this Lifetime U course over sort of 3 years. And I think 13 or 14 of them within the next week just said, yeah, that sounds great, we're in. And I was hoping there might have been 2 or 3 of them, like enough to justify the drive up to Wagga. But it really showed to me that until people have an idea of what you're offering, they're in absolutely no position to say whether they want to be there or not. So yeah, I was sort of asked to say, well, what do we charge for consultancy? I guess just those initial offerings that I sort of put together for those guys was along the lines of the Lifetime U course, but I'd go and see them every quarter, and we were charging $3,000. This is where I say do as I say, not as I do, because those guys are all still on the same price 8 years later. I haven't moved them at all, but I also feel like they're people that have given me a bit of an opportunity by sort of embracing me as doing their sheep consultancy work. So now that sort of looks more like a $10,000 package for 6 half days, and we sort of offer phone support so they can ring me whenever they want, and a written report after every visit. So again, I think you've just got to outline what they can expect and frame it up with what you want to be involved with. And I say that a little bit because as a vet, sometimes we can get tied into phone calls about a sick animal here or a sick animal there. I don't really want to be dealing with the odd sick animal. I want to be dealing with this is my preference, to deal with the whole farm and the farming business rather than the odd animal that might have a sickness. But again, everyone's different, and people have different skills and interests. But I guess put it on your terms, and then they're aware of what you're offering and what they can expect or not expect from you. And another thing there I'd make a point of is just consider the value proposition of what you're offering. So I guess I might touch on this a little bit later, but we as consultants need to be really good at understanding what makes money for producers, so that we can be, I guess, focusing on things that make a difference. Now that's not always a monetary difference. It might be a lifestyle thing, but if if we can do big ticket things for them, I think we can charge far better for it. I know you can't really see that. It's not deliberate, but that's a just a basic proposal of what I would send to someone, sort of outlining what I'd expect to do in the six days that I might spend with them. So just sort of outlining the different times a year that I'd like to be there and the basics of what you do. It's amazing how many of these things you may not end up focusing on depending on what the producer really wants, but it's just a bit of a guide, and it gives them sort of a bit of an understanding of what they can expect from the money that they're going to spend. So what to charge? I think this is a really interesting sort of question about what to charge. I just wanted to talk people through what I think is appropriate. I owned a vet business for 8 or 9 years, and we sold it 12 months ago, but I think I see it commonly that a lot of employees maybe don't appreciate the cost of running a business. So I just think it's a good thing to, the cost of employing someone. So I just thought a good way to step you through it. So, generally we consider a 38 or a 40-hour week. Obviously that's 5, lots of 8-hour days. In my experience, most people can only charge out about 5 hours of an 8-hour day. So there's a lot of time lost in coffee breaks, emails. It's amazing where the day goes, and you do 75 minutes work for someone, well, you tend to round it down to 60 when you charge it. And it's 52 weeks in a year, 4 weeks of annual leave, 2 weeks of public holidays, a week of study leave, sick pay. So all of a sudden we're back to 45 weeks at 25 hours. That's 1,125 hours. And you might think, yeah, okay, we can all add up, but I'm getting to something. So employment costs. And I just thought I'd use sort of my example of what it costs the business I work for to have me. I reckon I know that my car costs me about $25,000 a year in fuel, tyres, services, depreciation, insurance. I spend about $15,000 a year in sort of motels and food, and that's sort of essentially 50 days away at $300 a day. There's another $10,000 that disappears in payroll tax, work cover, insurances, computer phone, registrations, and memberships. And this is where it's really easy for you guys to go, well, I don't spend that much money on the car. You may not have a car. You can just put a line through that and you can adjust this. And the other thing I'd factor in is another $10,000 for admin. And depending on the amount of support you're getting, that could be a lot higher. Things like electricity, if there's only 3 of you in a building, could inflate this pretty quickly. So I guess in my example, the first $60,000 I earn every year goes straight to costs that are not my wage. And I just think that's something for us that we need to appreciate or understand. So that's $53 an hour, plus what you want to be paid. Now, if you want to be paid $50 an hour for every hour that you're actually at work, not the hours you're charging out, that's $90,000 a year, plus your super's $99,000. So you add that up, that's another $88 per hour you need to be netting. So we're at $141 before there's any profit to the business, and I think it's a pretty reasonable thing for someone that's employing people to expect about a $50,000 profit once someone's up and running. Because remember that the first 6 months, any business someone new is probably going to be generating a substantial loss. The next 12 months they might be breaking even, and from then on, that's probably when the employer starts to get some reward. So to get into the chase, I think $185 an hour is what we need to be charging as a professional consultant as a minimum. And if we're not doing that, then you either end up working much longer than 8-hour days to justify your work, which is fine if that's what you want to do, but work-life balance is a good thing. And either that or we got to be more efficient, which again, I've employed a lot of people. Well, not a lot of people. I've employed probably 40 vets over the last 8 years, and not many of them charge out more than 5 hours a day. And the other option is you take a lower pay, but I think we should be able to earn better than 90,000 once we're once we're up and running in this career choice. So that's my accountancy tutorial. Other thing I was sort of mentioned to discuss was sort of project work versus private work, and I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I think there's the concern I have with project work is sometimes there's substantial amount of funding available, and if you get it, it's fantastic, but you can put so much energy into it for the next 12 to 18 months that then you can lose regular work. So I just think people need to be careful of being really reliant on project work. But I mean, in saying that, some people are very, very good at getting that project work, and they can probably be more confident that they can keep finding that. Private work, I really enjoy that sort of client relationship, and it's probably why that's the path that I go down more. And I think it's far less likely that you would see a big chunk of clients drop off in a short amount of time. So I just think you've got more confidence that work will be there. But I think there's a balance, and for some people, the project work is a big part of what they do. So that's for each person. But I just sort of made a few points there about the pros and cons of each. That's just an example of my calendar, and I'm probably just showing that because I just like to lay out at the start of, normally in December every year, I'll sort of plan my 12 months in advance. And I reckon it's a great thing about this work is that when you're working with farmers, the day they put the bull in or the ram in, it really sets up the rest of the year. So I map out pretty well when I'm going to visit everyone. Obviously, you get plenty of phone calls 2 or 3 days out where they like to change that, and you can be sort of up to you whether you're flexible or not. I try and be when I can, but I really like the fact that I can plan my own holidays right from the start of the year at times that suit me, and then build the work around that. The other thing I would touch on there is that you'll see things like, no, that's not going to show up there, but I group them up where they are, so you get quite efficient with your travel. So I might go and do 3 days in SA every 2 months, and go and knock off 7 or 8 clients in a short amount of time. And I do 10 days in Wagga every 3 months. So it really allows you to make that travel efficient. But you've got to give people plenty of warning before you show up on their door. Key points, and then I'll finish up. I think a meet and greet before giving a client an offering is essential. I've sort of always thought that, and a couple of times I got a little bit lazy and just flicked them out a quote. And every time I've done that, they've said no. And it's very, very rare that you'll go and sit down with someone, show them your skill set, talk to them, and come up with some really simple solutions that might be beneficial for them, and then they say no. So I just think go and have a cup of tea with them, have a look around the farm before you start to offer everything. Listen. I reckon there's people that sort of have maybe have a one-size-fits-all approach for helping farmers, and I don't think farmers are interested in that. Like they hear things like stocking rate's a big profit driver, and if you turn up on their farm and tell them they need to run 25% more sheep the day you meet them, they just won't have confidence that you're basing that off anything. And you may well be absolutely right, but I think you've got to develop trust in them before you start making big decisions like that. So I like to sit down. I like to really listen to the problems they're having, and I make very few business changes in the first 12 months. I tinker with little things, but after 1, 2, 3, 4 years, I think you can really start to make a difference because they've got confidence in what you're suggesting, and often you don't even need to justify what you're recommending. And the different goals in farming life businesses, I won't go into detail here, but it's amazing how, and I used to think everyone just wanted to make more money. I put it down the bottom because it actually is pretty low on a lot of farming businesses. Even though they're a business, it's often pretty low on where they're at. And they want to have a simple farming operation. They want to be able to go and enjoy holidays with the kids. They want to have healthy animals. Sometimes they do just have an ego, and they do just want to top top the market every year with prices. Sometimes it's genetics. Sometimes it's just having more confidence in the decisions they're making, and they just want a trusted person to be able to liaise with. And there's a lot that really just want to leave the land in a better place than what it was. So I just think we've really got to listen to what they're asking, because I can't believe that I could group 10% of my clients in each one of those categories. They're not all focusing on the one thing. That's me, Joe.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And just that frank and open sharing of how you've approached your business and your pricing and all that sort of stuff was really valuable. Thank you very much. We will open up some questions for Andrew in a moment. But before we do that, I'd like to hand over to our next presenter, Elise. Sorry, I'm just admitting someone from the waiting room. I could see that flashing in the side there. So Elise Bowen and her business, Sheep Data Management. So Elise grew up on a family sheep farm in York, WA, and after graduating from Murdoch University with a Bachelor of Animal Science, she worked with the Murdoch DAFWA sheep team on a national sheep research projects, or various projects. In 2014, she established her own business, Sheep Data Management, and Elise is now based in Griffith in the Riverina region of New South Wales. However, her business services clients, mainly sheep producers from all around the country. So Elise, over to you.
Thanks very much, Joe, and I'll just get my PowerPoint up. And if I can remember what to do. I think I've nailed it.
You sure have. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay. So yeah, Joe's mentioned quite a bit of my background, so I'll breeze over it. But I suppose key foundations to where I am today really stems from my upbringing and the fact that my dad was a stud sheep breeder, and as a young child, or from the age of a young child, I was his right-hand man and really interested in animal breeding and genetics. And Dad was an early adopter of lamb plan and sheep genetics and performance recording and breeding values. So I was really surrounded by all that data collection, and from the age of 14 was entering all his data into the computer and sending it off to sheep genetics. So I have a pretty strong foundation in, I suppose, that basic sheep genetics data management, what it looks like, how to use the software and the systems, and interpreting the data that comes out of it. We also started adopting EID tags around the time I was finishing high school in the sort of mid-2000s. So I suppose coming out of university, having had that background really helped at the time when EID was really starting to take off, and has continued to take off since then. So I did a Bachelor of Animal Science, and Andrew mentioned, I suppose, the difference really between vet and animal science is vet, you're learning to treat individual animals that are already sick. Animal science approach is more learning about how to manage that whole mob of animals in a way that prevents them, hopefully, from getting disease. So have a bit of a background there. And my honours project was looking at reproduction in ewe lambs. And then I worked for 12 months post-uni with a sheep research team, and the Murdoch researchers in the sheep space are really leading the industry in a lot of the work that they're doing with reproduction and lamb survival, just to name a couple of the areas they're working in. Working with that research team really helped me develop my skills with Excel and managing large databases, using some basic formulas and things like that. So that's probably the one really great benefit of that year that I had in that job, was learning how to be more efficient in Excel, and skills that really set me up for my business today. I always wanted to return home to the farm, which might be the case with a lot of young professionals now. We sort of don't have that opportunity and get pushed by mum and dad to go off and do something else. And it was really quite apparent to me that there wasn't going to be an opportunity for me to return onto the farm. And I was a little heartbroken about that and disappointed. So I forced myself to leave, and I went overseas for a gap year in 2013. So I just worked for that 12-month stint, and then said to the Murdoch team, look, sorry, no, I have to go. I don't want to live in Perth and work in Perth, which is just too close to the farm, and knowing that I can't be there. So that prompted me to go off and spread my wings a little bit. And there's a couple of photos there of my time on the farm before I left, helping with pregnancy scanning and catching and tagging lambs at birth. And it was one of the happiest times of my life, but unfortunately, you know, those times sometimes, you know, you have to move on and do some different things. So When I returned from about 12 months overseas, I spent most of 2014 on the farm before I was really, pushed to go off and do something else. While I'd been on the farm, mostly just helping with lambing, I was approached by a stud breeder associate of Dad's who was based in New South Wales, and he said to me, "Do you want to do my data management? I'll fax you." And yes, he did. He faxed across all his lambing records and said, "Get an ABN, type up all my lambing data for me, collate it into Excel, put it into sheep genetics, same thing that you do for Dad. I'll pay you $30 an hour." So that's how my business started. It was just sort of happened. And I was like, yeah, why not? In the evenings by the fire, typing up his faxed data. So I got the ABN, and nothing really grew for a couple of years. Obviously, when I got the ABN, I had to choose a business name, and this was probably one of the things in hindsight that I probably nailed in a way. I'm not a very creative person, and I was sort of thinking, oh, what do I call my business? And I'm not creative, and I can't think of any, funny puns or anything. And I thought, do I want to work with livestock, or do I just want to work with sheep? And sheep were my passion. So I thought, look, I'll take a punt that hopefully, there might be in the future just enough work with sheep. And I stuck with sheep data management. And in hindsight, it was a really good decision. And I'm hoping if you'll type sheep data management into a Google search, my webpage might come up to the top of your search. So in a roundabout way, from not being too obscure and creative with my name, it's actually been a really good marketing strategy. So I left WA in October 2014. I decided I was going to head to Queensland. One reason, because I'd never been to Queensland, and the second reason was because it was pretty much the furthest away from the farm I could get without leaving the country. So I headed across to Queensland and had about 18 months up there. Eventually, I sort of decided I'd like to give my business a go, and I wanted to relocate somewhere a little bit strategic. So I'd have some opportunities for my business to attend events, network with potential clients and that sort of thing. So I thought of a few different places. I didn't want to go back to WA, and Wagga was one of the places that I had heard a bit about. I knew it was a bigger sized town. It's, pretty good location in regard to accessing a lot of different areas, in a day's drive. So I spent about 5 years in Wagga. While I'd been in Queensland, I had done some contract work with Murdoch University for some of their ongoing projects. I only had 2 data clients. One was mum and dad, and one was the initial client. So the business was sort of just a really little thing on the side while I worked in a fruit shop and tried some other things, and decided if I really wanted to, return to the sheep industry, or if I'd want to become a beach bum. But however, I did feel really, after about 12 months, probably I started to feel really homesick, not so much for home as in the farm, but just to be around people who were passionate about the same things as me. And I got homesick for kelpies, and I got homesick for the rural landscape and for those conversations with farmers. So that sort of, it took me about 6 months, I suppose, to relocate and decide where to relocate and how to relocate. But eventually, moved down to Wagga, and I sort of thought I need a bit of a backup plan. I'd had that casual work, not in ag, but just in a totally different industry while I was in Queensland, to bring in some income. And I thought, it is a tricky thing going from 2 clients to being able to support yourself. So I was actually quite proactive about it, and I contacted Charles Sturt University, a couple of staff there. I went on the website and I looked for a couple of staff that were A, involved in sheep research, and B, involved in teaching. And I thought they're probably the ones that I'll contact them. They've probably got the best opportunities to pick up some casual work. So that's what I did. And I was very fortunate that a couple of them emailed me back straight away and said, I know someone who's looking for help. So over the next sort of 4 years while I was living in Wagga, I was able to do some casual work for CSU in teaching, marking, quite a bit of marking, a bit of teaching, which was, an interesting experience, quite good pay doing teaching as well. And also research assistant work. So that sort of provided me with a little bit of a safety net. And I think that was really important for me because I was stepping away from, I suppose, guaranteed employment. And that did enable me to just have my business trickling along on the side. There's a couple of photos there of some of the contract work I was doing with Murdoch University. Some of the early sort of work with putting collars on sheep with motion sensors, and we were actually using them to establish parentage. So that was really fun, that sort of project work. It was really nice. I enjoy being involved in research. So it's really quite fun to, as Andrew said, have that mix of sort of private work that you're doing and then also being involved in the research sector a little bit. A couple of things I suppose I wanted to go through with regard to promotion and marketing that have really seemed to work for me, and may not work for everyone, but for me they have. So one of the things I suppose was to think about how when you're starting out your business and you're going to have a lot of this free time, which is just probably going to happen unless you're developing your business with a full-time job on the side, which I wasn't. So how I made the most of my free time, one of the things I did, and I sort of continue to do, but I don't have the time for it now, is to really try and invest as much as you can in your personal and professional development. So when I moved to Wagga over the next probably 2 years, I just said yes to as many opportunities as I could with industry, to be a part of different awards and competitions, leadership programs and things like that. And that was really a good way for me to network a little bit, get around to events and increase my work on my skills, I suppose, with presenting and networking, which are really important. If you end up being self-employed, you find a lot of the time you're working sort of by yourself quite remotely from other people. So just having built a bit of a network of mentors and associates gives you some good contacts that you can contact people and bounce ideas off them, ask them questions, going to events and actually knowing people because you've seen them at previous events. So it's worthwhile definitely attending as many things as you can. I also established a website very early on when I had time to do it, and I'm glad I did because now it's just takes me a little bit of time to keep it updated. And I do continue to get new client inquiry through my website every so often. So I've got a contact form on there. So I know when I get an email that's through my website, it's very obvious. Set up a Facebook page as well fairly early on. And that's provided really good exposure for my business and promoting my services. So in the sheep industry, we've got one particular group called the Australian Stud Sheep Group, which has over 2,000 people in that group. And only twice have I ever put a post in there just sharing my page and saying if anyone needs, data management assistance, get in touch. And both those 2 times, I had someone contact me straight away and they immediately became a client. So for me, that, I haven't really milked that very much because I haven't needed to, but at the beginning, that was a really handy way that I could just increase my exposure a little bit. As a sheep genetics service provider, I'm also able to be listed on the sheep genetics website as a service provider. So that helps, I suppose, get my name out there a little bit if people haven't heard of me, but they're looking for someone who can provide that service in their area. And I suppose another thing I mentioned in the early days when I used to get around to a lot of events, I sort of set myself up with a bit of material that would help identify me. So I've got a badge on my car, just a magnetic badge on my car. I've got those pull-up banners that if you have a stall somewhere, these things aren't expensive, but they're eye-catching, and I've got my logo on them and my face, my social media contacts on there. So I've got little ear tags that I've got business cards, but instead of a business card, I've got little ear tags that I've had them branded with my name and my phone number. So people can just grab an ear tag, which is kind of quirky and different, and take it with them instead of a business card. So just a few really cheap fun things like that I've found, particularly with younger people, students and the like, who are at events and things, will, take them with them, and you never know where a business card might end up. So, that's something quite cheap that you can do just to get your name out there. Snapshot there of my website on the left and my Facebook page on the right. One of the things I really wanted to touch on was, I suppose, a limitation for me, and an ongoing challenge for me is I don't have any agribusiness background or finance background or economics background. So everything has really been a learning curve, and I've, made a lot of mistakes probably along the way in hindsight. It has been, just constantly trying to improve and ask questions on how to do things. So initially I relied a lot on my accountant for advice, and he was really helpful when I was registering for an ABN. How do I do that? If and when I'm not yet registered for GST, but I'm sort of hovering around the point where I might need to, and I know my accountant will help me then. Employees, do I want any? I don't think so, but if I did, my accountant will be the person I'll go to work out how to structure that. at the beginning, and I still continue to charge hourly for my services, and that was primarily because at the beginning that's how it was set up with that initial client. But I've continued to use that method of charging per hour because I think it's a really transparent way to charge. And it's easy for me, I suppose, just clocking on and clocking off each time I'm working on a client's data. So I think I'll continue with that mode of charging. I took out business insurance fairly early on. Primarily, it was so I would be able to take on opportunities for corporate work. In hindsight, it has turned out that those universities that I've done work with, I haven't actually been able to do it through my business because of the structure of my business. It's not large enough for those institutions to have the right agreements with as a supplier. So I've actually gone onto their payroll and onto their books, and probably 10 to 15% of my annual income actually comes through being an employee of those universities. So yeah, business insurance, I suppose all consultants have it, but I haven't luckily had any issues where I've had to claim anything, and hopefully won't. And it is, you know, one of my biggest expenses probably is my insurance. I only recently started paying myself super. There's a lot of people probably shaking their head, and I'm now shaking my head now. I realised how important it is, but I never had, I suppose, someone in my life really affirming how important it was. So yeah, it's quite shocking, but probably only in the last 12 months I've realised and been paying myself super. So that's something, I suppose, to make sure you do from the get-go. When you move away from employment with an employer paying you super, make sure you're aware of what that means down the track if you don't keep doing that yourself. So I asked for feedback on rates from some other consultants who I would consider, you know, trusted mentors. And how did that come about? It really came about because over time I had a few clients, more and more clients, who would tell me that I was too cheap. And at the beginning I thought, oh, well, that's okay. Like, I want to be accessible to everyone and I don't want to turn people away because they can't afford me. But I also realized, well, I don't want to sell myself too short and just give things away. So I thought I've got to try and find out a little bit how much other people are charging, because, you know, Andrew's been very upfront about what he charges, but it's just not easy to find that information. And there's not that transparency out there, I suppose, and there's no standard pricing for things. So I asked a few people that I trust, you know, what do you charge, but what do you think is a fair going rate for these types of services? How do you charge for travel? These sort of questions. And from that, I learned that I was charging about 40% of what others were charging for a very similar service. So it was a bit of a eye-opening discovery, I suppose. And I sort of realized, well, I can't keep doing this. I've got to put my rates up, but it's a hard thing to do, to go from, I think I was on about $40 an hour at that stage, you know, 40 to, you know, between 80 and $120 an hour just for the basic data management stuff I was doing. So it is a really, yeah, it's a hard thing to do. And I think once you've got those established clients, and when I would put my rates up, I'd get really lovely responses from them that you're worth every cent, and, you know, you could charge me 4 times as much and I'd still use your services. So once you've got people on board and they can see the value that you're adding to their business, I think putting your rates up isn't, you know, it's not that hard, but I had to justify it to myself. And also bearing in mind, I suppose, that it's the new clients that you haven't yet got on board yet. They're the ones who'll shy away from what your rate is. So I actually went through an exercise which was sort of guided by the feedback from these consultants to calculate what I think my hourly rate should be. And I suppose it's a little bit similar to Andrew's, not quite as in depth, because I don't have nowhere near the sort of costs that he has. Consulting is only a very small, I suppose, a small part of the service that I offer. A lot of it is just very basic data management. I don't have a lot of travel expenses and things like that. I don't have employees. So essentially you've got to work out, I suppose, what do you want to earn? What's my opportunity cost? If I'd kept a job with the Department of Agriculture, what would I hope my annual salary would be? And then you've got to take into consideration, okay, I've got to pay myself superannuation and I've got these other costs to my business. So also that realistic, you know, how many hours of paid work am I doing a week? And it was interesting to see that Andrew works on a 25-hour week, because that was sort of my guesstimation as well. When you take into consideration the time you're taking out to go to events and courses and doing your emails and things like that, it really is about 25 hours a week. So in this simplistic example, I would say, well, you know, if you wanted to take home $80,000 a year and you had $20,000 in costs, then you'd be looking at wanting to generate $100,000. So that would bring it down to that really basic work, about $83 an hour. And so that sort of sat within this this bracket that was sort of the going rate at the time for that basic data management. So that just helped me to justify, I suppose, that I was undervaluing my service, and over time I've been offering increased efficiency because I've gained more experience and skills. So it's taking me less time to do the jobs for people that I was doing before. So I could justify putting my rates up. You need to acknowledge what your skills are worth, and I suppose a point here is that women are much more likely than men to undervalue the service that they're offering, and they're much more likely to just accept the going rate and not fight, to put your rates up. So my strategy was that I would stage my increases in rates over time and give my clients a lot of notice in advance, and also try and promise to myself that I would review my rates more frequently, not just leave it another few years before I had a look at where I was and what my costs were. So now I offer varied services at a range of more appropriate price points, from the on-farm stuff, which you can't charge as much for. This is just on-farm data collection, not consulting type stuff. Just data collection through to basic data management, and then stepping up with some clients into the more of the consulting work around animal breeding, genetic selection, using genetic services, and then obviously the higher paid work, which is more of the corporate and industry work. So that's where I finished. I've probably used up more than my time, so I'll end my.
Thanks, Elise.
Yeah.
That's
All
great.
right.
Perfectly on time, by the way, so thank you. Okay, so just because of the small number of people we've got online live, I'm very happy to take questions through the mics, if that's okay, rather than through the chat function. So opening up now to any questions to either Andrew and Elise, and that they can tic-tac on some of the responses to any questions that people might have. So would anyone like to pose a question?
I have a question about travel rates. Given the cost of fuel and increasing cost in cars and, just increasing cost of life in general, are you guys charging just the ATO rate, or are you charging over and above that, or do you charge an hourly rate for your travel and not a per kilometre rate?
Andrew, would you like to respond first? Oh,
yeah,
Elise, off you go.
I was just going to say, I charge per kilometre. I don't charge for my time whilst in the car. I've heard of some people charge for their time and per kilometre. The sort of feedback I got from a couple of consultants when I did that asking, what's a fair and going thing. Some people charge travel both ways. So if I'm going to some kind of a corporate event type thing, or a workshop or industry funded thing, I'll charge travel both ways. If I'm visiting a client, I only charge travel one way. As a bit of a compromise. Don't know what you do, Andrew. And I was also thinking, far out, I've only just, put my travel up probably in the last 12 months. And I'm probably thinking maybe I should be doing that again too, because as you say, fuel is ridiculous. Thankfully, I don't leave the house much, so I'm not wasting too much money when I'm traveling. But keen to hear what you say, Andrew.
Look, we're $2 a K, but with my consultancy work, probably 80% of it is these clients are on a package and they don't get charged it at all. It's sort of built into that, and I guess I think the phone support that it's the private work that I'm doing. So much of it actually, while I go and visit them on their farms, and that is of some value, it's the phone call that a week later because something's popped up that is probably just as valuable to them. So I spend 3 or 4 hours a day on the phone, and so whether I'm in the car or whether I'm at home, it is actually sort of still being able to be charged out. So it actually works quite well, the time spent in the car in a way. But if a client rang me up that it's not on the package as such, they'd get charged $2 a K both ways, which is $200 an hour, and it's not as profitable as when you're on a farm, because you actually are spending diesel at what's that? It's probably only, well, my car is about 40 cents a K, so it cost me about 40 $40 an hour. So, you know, you're back to your hourly rate, sort of. So it's, yeah, anyway, that's what we do.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Elise, and thanks for the question, Meg. Any other questions from the audience? I have a question then, if that's all right. I was just interested to know, obviously, it becomes a bit of a trap when you're building a business and building clients to neglect your professional development. So I was just interested to know from both of you how you try and keep up to date with new skill development and awareness of tools and resources and things to support your clients.
You go, Liz.
Yeah, well, I suppose for me, a large part of my role is as the sheep genetic service provider with stud breeders. So we have quite a good network that supports us as service providers, and there's an annual sort of get together where we hear about all the new changes that are happening and to support us to extend that information to our clients. Also, like during COVID, I suppose, since COVID, there's been so many great webinars and things offered online, which a lot of them I don't now tune into live because it's just not a good time. And I've got one on Campylobacter, for example, just sitting in my inbox there that I'm yet to listen to. So there's a lot of great industry information out there. I try and get from webinars and things. And then also just attending events, I suppose. If something, is in my area and interests me, that's probably the way I get around. And then at least if I might not remember all the information, but I'll remember the names of the people that I can follow up with for more information.
Yeah, probably similar to Elise. Some webinars, probably online reading, but I sort of try to attend a conference every year, being a vet conference. So we have sort of a week-long conference most year, or we have a cattle one and a sheep one most years. And I just go for the social side just as much as the learning, but it's a great way to sort of combine the two, to catch up with friends from uni. And but we're probably pretty lucky in the vet profession that there is those annual conferences. I guess it's something that sort of appears to be, I guess you guys are leading the way with the livestock advisor updates, but hopefully, in 5-10 years time, there's a similar culture where people are willing to pay. And that's actually something that I find weird, in a way, a little bit weird, that as the MLA needs to fund these things, we pay $2,000 to go to conferences. It's great that it's free or that they're subsidised, but it's a sort of a funny culture how consultants are really propped up by industry. And it's as a vet, I often see that the failings of vets to out on producer farms, and I wish in a way that there was similar advantages for vets in livestock areas. But it's a great opportunity, so I'm not bagging it. I think it's fantastic.
Great.
I've also just wanted to slip in a quick comment, Joe. I'm a recent subscriber to Twitter, probably in the last 2 years, and I found Twitter a really fantastic forum. I don't comment much, but it's a really fantastic forum. Just the threads that come through, particularly with tech questions and issues and examples that real on-farm producers sharing some of the technologies they're using, some of the strategies they have for managing this, that, and the other. And it's a really great way just to see what's happening out there, I suppose, particularly in the tech world. I don't know if you're a Twitter user, Andrew, but I found that a really good forum for finding out who's who in the zoo a lot of the time.
I have no social media. I'm nothing. No Facebook, no Twitter, no anything. I hate it. Sorry, I know it's good for business, but I hate it for my mental health. So I took myself off it 4 years ago, and love the fact that I don't get absorbed into it. But I think it's great for business. Yep.
It certainly fills in some of those 3 hours a day that is unpaid work.
Yeah.
Last call for questions from the audience. If anyone has any, feel free to. Wendy, have you got a question?
Yeah, just for both Andrew and Elise, when you're like trying to work out your, probably more Andrew, your packages, are they always on a 12-monthly like cycle of to negotiate with your individual clients, or do you have varying time frames that you sort of, how do you work that out, I suppose, when you're sort of trying to build your business?
Yeah, look, the packages I'm just trying to think through it, but no, everyone has always been a 12-month offering. I bill them quarterly, so they get a bill the middle month of every quarter. So that way, if if they were to pull out and they're about to get the annual invoice, you just avoid that confusion. And from a cash flow perspective, it's a constant stream. But then I'm also not having to send them a bill every month, because I reckon people get sick of seeing a bill every month. And there's some months where I may not speak or see the client, and if they get a bill in the mail, I don't sort of like that myself. Whereas I am seeing them every 3 months, so that's how I do it. And there's no contracts. Quite a few of them said, "Oh, is there a contract?" I said, "No, there's not. Like, you tell me you want to stop tomorrow, we stop tomorrow. That's it." And just a little thing I do is I never bill them the first quarter that I start. So if a client rings me in January and says, "Oh, I'm interested in doing something," I get out there in February and put a proposal to them, have a meeting. I don't know. It really seems to bond with them. I shouldn't give away these tips, but they often say, "Oh, you haven't sent me a bill," and I say, "Oh, look, it's coming." But I just think it's a way of not looking like you're, really trying to get every single dollar out of them. A little bit of that upfront, and it's like, I think I've probably got 90% of the clients that I've ever started working with are still working with me. So I think it's a little bit of upfront. Not looking greedy, I think pays dividends in the long run. And that's something I said that earlier, but I will always go and visit someone and provide a full report before they know what it's going to cost, just so they've got a taste of what they're going to get.
That's offering really good value, I think. Just they can, if they're not getting faced with a bill straight away and they're getting a little bit of a taster, I can see how that would help with client retention, and also just really building that relationship, I suppose, quite strongly. Yeah.
And I think it's something that you start working with the client, 3 years later you're still working with them. The mental drain from that client is, it's hard to know, but it's probably only 60% of what it was the first year. So in a way, it's probably how I justify not putting up the prices for them, is that they're actually it's less work for me, because I actually know their business really well and I know their skill set, and you can trust or not trust the answers because you actually understand their own skill set. So I think it's I just think client retention makes this job a lot easier.
Thank you. We have time for one last question, if anyone has one.
Yeah, I've got another one that I'll ask if nobody else has got a question. It's just around seeing results on funds. So, when you go out and you're giving advice, or at least when you're, sending back your data that's been interpreted for your clients or whatever, how long do you think it takes your clients to make a change that's actually making an impact on their business?
Highly variable. Like, there's some clients that, it might be hard to see any change. And look, sometimes there isn't any change. Like, I've had clients that I wonder sometimes why they're doing it, because they're not actually willing to change. But those that are willing to change, so I think it comes down to their attitude, and but those that are willing to change and actually are embracing change, like they've got you on board because they do want to change something, it can be so rapid. Like, I do a fair bit of financial benchmarking with clients now, so you're able to see the dollar value change over time, and that makes it easier. But stocking rate is probably the one where you can, you work with someone for 12 to 18 months, and then you start saying, look, let's add 20%, let's add 15%, let's add another 10, and you look down the track and they're running twice as many sheep on the same amount of land, and the production of the animals is the same, if not better, because they've probably often got healthier animals because they're not so fat. It's amazing. Like, so you can see it really quickly if they embrace change, but I think it's probably more on the client as to whether they're really wanting to change their operation, or whether there's some people that do want their hand to be held because they want the hand to be held, not because they want to change. So I'm not really answering that, Meg, but it varies. Sometimes it's dramatic, and sometimes it's slow or not at all, sadly.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say definitely second what Andrew says there about, you know, you can provide all the information to the client, but at the end of the day, they've got to be the one who makes the decision. In my case, it might be, you know, selecting the right animals from that data that they've collected. Sometimes they'll just continue to select them on the same way they've always been doing it. They're just going through the motion of getting the data because they think they need it. They're not actually impacting their decisions with it. Probably a broad comment would also be with genetics. It's probably a longer time to when you can see the change. Because it is more incremental and it's compounding over time. So it takes a few generations to be able to see the genetics really changing, coming through. Whereas, you know, management type things might be, you know, managing the ewes better around joining time and differentially managing them to put more condition on them. You can get that result pretty much straight away within, you know, at the end of joining, you've pregnancy scanning, you've got the result there. So it does depend on, I suppose, what aspect of the business that you're working on as to how rapidly you can get the change. But at the end of the day, yeah, there's clients who come to you and they've already got an idea of what they want and they're sort of driving it, and there's others that sort of come to you asking for your advice, what should I do, and they're not necessarily going to really drive and implement those changes as much as the other farmer is.
Thank you both. In the interest of time, I think we'll have to call a halt there to questions. But from my point of view, I just want to thank Andrew and Elise a lot. I think it's so refreshing to have this really open and frank sharing of insights and pitfalls and successes and failures. And it can, you know, it just must be so valuable to young or early career advisors that are thinking about taking that plunge into their own business and into consulting on their own. So thank you very much for all the work you put into preparing your slides and to sharing that information today. I have one final poll to launch. Please, it will appear on your screen. Just for those that are attending, this is our only means of gathering data to give to MLA about the value of these webinars. So if you wouldn't mind participating in that poll just to share how you found today's webinar, that would be greatly appreciated. And a heads up of things into the future, we have one more webinar to go for this series for 2022. That will be announced really soon. But also, please keep an eye out for the programs which will be released any day for the North, the South and the West Livestock Advisor face-to-face events, which will be held this year in Townsville, in Melbourne and in Perth. So we look forward to hopefully being able to network in person at those events, and one last webinar for the series. So thanks again, Andrew and Elise.
Can I just say something? Sorry.
Of course.
Well, thanks, Joe. But what I want to say was that, like, and I know this goes out to more people, but very open to talk about this sort of stuff. Like I think often people think that you're competitors, and I guess hope for the day that, you know, people go and ask, well, who's your accountant to a farmer? Well, everyone's got an answer to that. I'd love it to be one day to be who's your livestock advisor, and everyone's got one, because we're not competing with each other at all. There's God knows how many farmers out there that don't have an advisor, and the more they get them, the more the others start to go, oh, maybe I could actually get some benefit from this. So yeah, like open door policy. I'm sure Elizabeth is saying that if anyone ever needs, you know, advice, someone to chew the fat over what they're thinking, yeah, we just phone calls away.
Yeah, there's plenty of opportunities, definitely. I'd echo that. And at the end of the day, we are, you know, it's up to us to sort of choose our niche and our specialist area. Like Andrew and I have got pretty much no overlap, really. So yeah, lots of opportunities. And
diverse experiences as well. So that was really great. Thank you very much for your kind offers to help outside of this webinar as well. So thank you, everyone. Safe travels if anyone's traveling home. Hopefully you're all in the comfort of your lounge room and you don't have to go very far at all. But thanks again, and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thanks, Joe.
Hey, Joe.
Thanks, everybody.